Good evening, everyone, and thanks once again for joining us for Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. And up first, we've got, hit the right key here, hazardous weather graphic. There's a blizzard warning out for the eastern Arctic coast that kicks into effect at midnight tonight and continues through midnight Sunday night or through Sunday evening. And that's for wind gusts to 60 miles an hour out of the east. East winds gusting to 60 miles per hour. That'll create whiteout conditions, blizzard conditions, as I mentioned in the statement, for that area during that time for about 24 hours. Otherwise, winter weather advisory out for the upper Koyukuk Valley, and that's out until 10 p.m. this evening. And that's for east winds been gusting to 45 miles per hour there, creating visibilities less than a half mile and blowing snow. And that's mostly along the highway there at the summits. Again, that ends at 10 p.m. this evening. And then heading south, continuing to head south, there's a winter weather advisory for the eastern Alaska range that's out, until 6 p.m. Sunday. And that's for southeast winds that'll gust to 60 miles per hour. Wind advisory, gust 60 miles an hour for the eastern Alaska range. And that's for tonight through Sunday until 6 p.m. And then for the Copper River Basin, there's a winter weather advisory continues tonight until 1 p.m. Sunday for 2 to 5 more inches of snow there with possible areas of freezing rain. And from there, going to satellite imagery, you can see the south to north flow bringing a lot of clouds northward all the way up there to Arctic Village now. That's mostly mid and high level clouds up that way and north of the Alaska range with main precipitation producing clouds over the Copper River Basin to the North Gulf Coast areas, and some of that's spilling into the northern panhandle, but nothing too terribly heavy there. And then some more clouds out over the western part of the state. A few areas of clearing occurring over Cook Inlet and over toward the western Alaska range down into northeast Bristol Bay, but not too much widespread clearing. Drying out over the southern panhandle. A few breaks there, allowing temperatures to rise to 67 degrees at Shelter Cove at early afternoon today. Quite warm down there, temperatures remaining, even warmer down over British Columbia. But cooler temperatures starting to warm up, though, across southern Alaska, with temperatures in the mid to upper 30s most areas, and some areas in the lower 40s. And rolling this through, or moving on to today's chart, about 0.8 of an inch of rain fell at Cordova today, and that was the heaviest precipitation amount I could find on the chart. Juneau and Haines picked up about 0.5 inch of precipitation, and much as 3 to 5 inches of snow fell today in the Copper River Basin, some of that trying to push north of the Alaska range there. And you can see the tight gradient there across the central interior supporting the winter weather advisory for the blowing snow in the upper Koyukuk Valley. Mostly dry conditions over the Bering Sea under light northerly winds, light toward northerly winds with a few showers over the Aleutians, a little more scattered over the Alaska Peninsula area. And the forecast for tonight, rain, moderate at times, Kodiak Island, periods of rain and fog for the North Gulf Coast into the Kenai Peninsula, heaviest over western Prince William Sound area, and then in advance of the frontal boundary there, pretty good rain fall for Yakutat, and then periods of rain over the northern panhandle and along the central coast, but staying dry down to the south. Look for areas of snow north of the front there, all the way up to the eastern Brooks Range with some flurries and fog for the eastern Arctic coast, along with those increasing winds. Could pick up an inch of snow over the next day or so up there, and that'll just add to the blowing snow expected to create whiteout conditions. That gradient tightens up, especially late tonight and early tomorrow. Otherwise, back to the west, periods of rain over the Aleutians, eastern Aleutians, and rain and snow showers over the southwest coast. And for Sunday, Areas of rain and snow into the Copper River Basin, milder temperatures there. Highs in the 40s, south central Alaska and the North Gulf coastal areas. Highs in the mid-60s over the southern panhandle, upper 50s to lower 60s to the north there, with some rain continuing, but it'll be lighter rain for the eastern North Gulf coast. Just some showers along the coast of the panhandle. Scattered showers over the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians, and some rain or snow showers with north winds pulling a little bit chillier air down to the Pribilof Islands. That'll extend up to the southwest coast with that trough there. And snow flurries, blowing snow, and that blizzard warning out for the eastern Arctic coast. Again, east winds gusting to 60 miles per hour. And then for Monday, low pressure moves up to the eastern Arctic coast there, so those winds will drop off markedly Sunday night and become, if this pattern works out, become light and variable on Monday, and even light winds on the west side. Actually, all of interior Alaska looking pretty light on the winds, and the precipitation, nothing heavy anticipated. Rain and snow showers from the Alaska Range southward, and periods of light rain and fog as a couple of weak troughs move northward in that weak southerly flow coming up to the North Gulf coast. Chance of showers in the northern panhandle and dry to the south. And rain and snow for the Pribilof Islands, a little bit gusty on the north winds there, maybe up to 30, 35 miles an hour, extending back to the St. Lawrence Island area. And breezy with rain over the eastern Aleutians. And moving on to the lows tonight, upper 40s in the northern panhandle to lower 50s over the southern areas, upper 20s for the Copper River Basin, otherwise lows above freezing across south central Alaska and the Susitna Valley. 35, say, at Talkeetna, to 45 at Homer, about the same in Kodiak, mid-30s to lower 40s for Bristol Bay, and 25 to 30 for the Kuskokwim Valley. Highs in the Kuskokwim Valley on Sunday, upper 30s to lower 40s, 40 to 45. Susitna Valley, near 40 for the Copper River Basin, and 66 degrees forecast for Klawock, Ketchikan, 51 for Kodiak, mid to upper 40s for the Bristol Bay area, followed by lows, upper 20s, lower 30s in the Kuskokwim Valley, near 30 for the Copper River Basin, mid to upper 30s, south central Alaska, the North Gulf Coast, lower 40s, southern Kenai Peninsula, Seward to Homer, Seldovia, and lower 50s over the southern panhandle, mid 30s to the Bristol Bay. Highs Monday afternoon, mid 40s Copper River Basin, mid to upper 40s across south central Alaska to near 50 from Homer to Kodiak, in the 40s for Bristol Bay, and a little cooler over the southern panhandle, mid to upper 50s there. And the lows tonight, teens and 20s over the northern interior out to the Arctic coast, followed by highs in the mid to upper 30s through the Tanana Valley. Some areas reaching the lower 40s, Delta Junction, for example, upper 20s, lower 30s for the Arctic coast. Lows, teens and 20s again, followed by highs in the upper 30s to near 40. Upper 30s Monday afternoon on the southern Seward Peninsula. Mid-20s to lower 30s for the Arctic coast and North Slope. Out to the southwest there, we've got upper 20s to lower 30s, southwest coast, St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise, upper 30s to near 40 for the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. Mid-30s in the Pribilofs. Highs in the 40s most areas. Upper 30s along the southwest coast, up toward the Bering Strait, Savunga, Gamble. Lows near freezing for the St. Lawrence Island area. Lower 30s southwest coast. Mid to upper 30s for the Aleutians. And then the afternoon highs, mid to upper 40s for the Aleutians, near 40 along the southwest coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather. Got IFR, North Slope, Arctic coast. A lot of IFR Sunday morning from the northeast interior down, covering across southern Alaska, up the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta coast, and into the northern panhandle. VFR southern southeast coast, marginal VFR for the central eastern Aleutians, Pribilofs north to St. Lawrence Island, and then some more VFR, Norton Sound across the Seward Peninsula to the northwest interior. And for the afternoon, IFR, Arctic coast, North Slope, and into the eastern Brooks Range, southward there into the Yukon Flats, and some just south of Eagle to almost down to Northway and Tok, into the Chicken area. And IFR along the Alaska Range becomes more extensive over the Copper River Basin and the North Gulf Coast, and IFR along the coast of the Panhandle, but becoming VFR over the inside waters. Another area of IFR, southwest Kodiak Island up across the Bristol Bay area, southwest coast into the Yukon Delta to the Bering Strait. And for Monday morning, IFR along the Arctic coast and to a certain extent into the North Slope. Otherwise, IFR northern Bering Sea and across Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, across the Kuskokwim Mountains into the valley, and actually eastward there across Iliamna Lake, northeast Bristol Bay, Shelikof Strait, marginal VFR, south central Alaska, IFR, Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, all of the Panhandle, and some IFR over the eastern interior with VFR from Adak westward to the Komodorskis, otherwise the Pribilofs, eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, marginal VFR. For the afternoon on Monday, got a break in between systems there over the west central Aleutians, but you can see some IFR edging in on the left-hand part of the map. Otherwise, IFR, St. Lawrence Island to Nunivak Island and the western interior up to the western Arctic coast and along the Brooks Range. Some IFR over the North Gulf Coast range, possibly into the Wrangell Mountains. Good VFR southeast of Yakutat, all of the Panhandle VFR for the afternoon Monday. Kodiak Island, mostly VFR as well, as the Tanana Valley there, Nenana and Fairbanks, up to possibly Beaver. And for Anatuvik, looking marginal for the passes in the Brooks Range, or at least for Anatuvik, IFR though for Adigan Pass. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, look for IFR, especially on the eastern entrances. Rainy, IFR. Windy, IFR, except better on the north side. Isabel, same thing, IFR, higher conditions north entrance. And Mentesta, marginal VFR in the north entrance, otherwise IFR. And for Tanita, IFR. Portage, IFR. And Chilcoot and White. Looking for some improvement through the day, starting out IFR and hopefully ending with marginal VFR conditions or better. Freezing levels, quite a gradient over the southeast interior. You can see the southerly flow pushing 2,000 feet back northward, almost to the eastern Brooks Range, and 6,000 feet in over the 40-mile country, 8,000 feet over the southern Copper River Basin, and then running at about actually 6,000 feet southern Copper River Basin, 8 to 12,000 feet over the Panhandle, and 2,000 feet pretty much along the Aleutians out to the west. And from there, taking a look at icing, could be some considerable moderate rime icing North Gulf Coast tomorrow, and then some isolated moderate up over the northeast interior, eastern Arctic coast, Brooks Range, possibly down into the Koyukuk Valley, but that's just a slight chance. Otherwise, icing free just about everywhere else. And the jet stream, big trough out over the Bering Sea and a big high over northwest Canada. So in between the two, it's kind of put the squeeze on the atmosphere, and we've got southerly winds, 135 knots blowing in from the Gulf of Alaska right across the Copper River Basin and just about up to the Yukon River there before they start to diminish a little bit. And at 9,000 feet, 40 to 45 knot winds over the eastern interior, up to 65 knots there over the northern Panhandle, lighter winds out to the west. And 3,000 foot, we've got 50 knots out of the east for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, 45 knots central and western Arctic coast, turning northerly and diminishing to about 30 knots northwest of the Pribilofs. And then westerlies at about 30 knots coming across the Alaska Peninsula, turning south 30 to 45 knots into the North Gulf Coast. Turbulence, considerable moderate chop along the coast of the Panhandle and the eastern Arctic coast, western Arctic coast, and St. Lawrence Island.
Ahoy, Extra Cadets, and welcome to the Okeanos Explorer. I'm Debbie, and I'm an ocean explorer. I work for NOAA, which stands for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Together with many other people, I work on this ship and we explore the deep sea. How do we do that? Let's go find out.
Octonauts, let's do this. Yow!
The pressure in the ocean is so great humans can't go there, so we send a special robot. Octocadets, meet Deep Discoverer, our special robot for ocean exploration. And this is Chris. He works with Deep Discoverer. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Debbie.
Can you tell us about what Deep Discoverer does?
Sure. So this is Deep Discoverer, and today we're going to take Deep Discoverer up to 4 miles down to the ocean floor so you can see what Deep Discoverer sees.
And how do we do that?
We do that by using these powerful cameras and powerful lights.
That's neat. And what is that?
And this is our manipulator arm, and we use this arm to take biological and geological samples that we store up front in these boxes, and so that we can bring them to the surface so scientists can analyze them.
Wow, isn't that cool, Octocadets? Wow! Now that we know more about the special robot that explores the seafloor, let's find out more about the ship. Octocadets, let's do this. Now let's find out what we do with D2's video. Come along. This is the control room. A lot of things about D2 happen in here. Behind me you see the pilots. They steer D2 on the seafloor. And over here we have scientists. Hi Steve and Stacy.
Hi, this is Steve and I'm Stacy and we are marine biologists.
Can you tell us about the work you do here?
We actually look at the videos collected by the robots and we try to identify organisms along with other scientists on the shore.
What are you looking at right now?
We're actually looking at a sea star.
That's so awesome, thank you. Now let's look at how we make maps of the seafloor.
Excellent, Quasi. A good map helps you to get to places you've never been.
We also have a scientist on board who makes maps of the seafloor. Hi Derek.
Hi, Debbie.
Can you tell us about your work?
Sure. My job on the ship is to make maps of the ocean floor. We do this by sending sound from the bottom of the ship. It echoes off the seafloor and comes back to the ship. And then from that, we can make maps like this. So this is what it would look like if you were able to drain the water out of the ocean and actually see what the landscape looked like down there. We use these maps to give the vehicles a place to dive, and they explore further, just like Octonauts do.
Status report, Dashi.
We're right on course, Captain.
So earlier we learned that D2 picks things up from the seafloor with his manipulator arm. Let's find out what we do with those samples. This is the wet lab, and Megan spends a lot of time here. Megan, can you tell us about your work?
I am the sample data manager, so when the ROV comes up, we go out and we collect the samples from the ROV and we bring them in here. And we try to record as much information about them as possible, everything from the details about what they look like to the environment conditions where they were found. How cold was it, for example? Then we come in and we take imagery using this microscope, and we take pictures using this camera as well. And then after we get all the pictures taken and we're ready, we prepare them for shipping to other scientists and museums so more science can be done, such as the squat lobster, this cup coral as well.
And what is that?
This is a piece of coral, or several pieces of coral, that we think might actually be a new species. So we are going to send it out for a comparison to existing species to see if we discovered something new.
Wow, you have a really cool job.
Thank you.
Fascinating. I've read about this, but I've never actually seen it.
An important part of how we explore the ocean is keeping in touch with scientists and Octocadets on shore. Let's go see how we do that. Rosemary, could you tell the Octocadets a little about what that dish does?
Sure. My name is Lieutenant Rosemary Abbott. I'm the operations officer aboard the Okeanos Explorer, and that is our VSAT. It stands for Very Small Aperture Terminal, and inside that satellite dome is a very powerful dish antenna that allows us to communicate with shore and share video in real time. The technology is called telepresence.
Wow, that is so interesting. Thank you, Rosemary. Now I'm getting really hungry. Let's go to the kitchen and talk about food. This is the ship's kitchen, also known as the galley. And this is Michael. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Debbie.
Michael is the chief steward on this ship, and he keeps 49 people fed for 3 weeks at a time. Michael, how do you do that?
With a lot of care and with the help of 3 crew members. I have myself, the chief steward, a chief cook, and a second cook. And we just do it with a lot of love and care and make sure that everybody's happy and well fed. We use up to 150 dozen eggs per trip, up to 100 gallons of milk, a lot of veggies and fruits, a lot of snacks. Everybody's very pleased with what we usually put out. We also make sure that we do it in a loving way, in a sanitary way, in a safe way that keeps everybody from getting any tummy aches.
I'm about to enter the ship's bridge. It's like the Octopod's headquarters.
Octonauts to the HQ.
Ahoy, Captain.
Ahoy, Debbie.
Hi, Eric.
Hello.
Octocadets, meet Eric Johnson, the commander of the ship. Eric, can you tell us about what you do up here?
Absolutely. Hello, Octocadets. My name's Eric Johnson. I'm an Corps officer, and I'm the captain of the Okeanos Explorer. Welcome to my office. This is where we drive the ship. This is where we control the operations. We run the propellers that are underneath us in the back to the wheel up here at the front, which is where we steer. It's a pretty cool job. It's very exciting, and it's pretty beautiful around here as well.
So, Octocadets, now you know a little bit about the ship and how we explore the deep sea. I hope you enjoyed our time together. I'll see you next time.
Debbie, safety first.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Coastal waters looking at 20 knot winds for the south coast. Northern coast of the Panhandle, south winds 30 knots, seas 10 to 12 feet. Lighter winds over the inner channels with Lynn Canal looking at a southeast breeze at 10 knots for Sunday. Central and southern inside waters, south winds 15 knots, 3 to 5 foot seas. And for Monday, south to southeast winds over the inside waters at about 15 knots with 3 to 4 foot seas. And the central and south coast looking at southwest winds at 20 knots with seas running 8 to 9 feet. And the north coast winds will be south at 20 knots with seas a little under 10 feet. Prince William Sound on Sunday, southeast winds 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Eastern North Gulf Coast, south winds 20 knots with 10 foot seas. Barren Island, southeast winds 25 knots. And also for the western North Gulf Coast, southeast winds 25 knots. Kamishak Bay, southeast winds 25 knots. And for Cook Inlet, east-northeast winds 15 to 20 knots. For Monday, southern Cook Inlet, small craft advisories, southeast winds 25 knots with 6 foot seas, about the same for Kamishak Bay. Barren Islands and the North Gulf Coast, small craft advisories for southeast winds at 30 knots with seas running 9 to 10 feet. Prince William Sound, southeast wind 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Kodiak Island, south winds 25 knots with 10 foot seas for Sunday. Otherwise, the Alaska Peninsula winds will be out of the northwest at 20 knots, and Bristol Bay looking at southwest winds at 15. No change for Bristol Bay on Monday. Winds stay southwest at 15 knots, seas around 3 feet. Small craft advisories for the Alaska Peninsula, west-northwest winds 25 to 30 knots. Gale warnings for Kodiak Island, southeast winds 45 knots with 12-foot seas. Eastern Aleutians, Sunday, northwest winds 20 to 25 knots. Central Aleutians, northwest winds 20 to 25 knots. And the western Aleutians, northwest winds at 20 knots with 7-foot seas. And for Monday, gale warnings for the far western Aleutians west of Kiska Island, southwest winds 45 knots. Central Aleutians, northwest winds 30 knots. Eastern Aleutians, winds will be northwest at 30 knots with seas at 9 to 13 feet. For the Kuskokwim Delta coast on Sunday, northwest winds at 15 knots. Otherwise, the Pribilofs, northwest at 20. Small craft advisories for the northern Bering Sea, St. Matthew Island, St. Lawrence Island, north winds at 30 knots. A little lighter for the Yukon Delta coast, north at 25 knots, seas 8 feet. And for Monday, Yukon Delta Coast, St. Lawrence Island, north winds at 25 knots with 8-foot seas. And for St. Matthew Island, St. George, and St. Paul, northwest winds 30 knots, 11 to 13-foot seas. Kuskokwim Delta Coast, light west winds at 15 knots with 4-foot seas. Up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, gale warnings for Sunday. East winds sustained at 40 knots with 14-foot seas. Small craft advisories on the central Arctic coast there for east winds at 30 knots with 9-foot seas. And northeast winds 25 to 30 knots for the western Arctic coast, and from Cape Thompson to Wales, northeast winds 30 knots, seas at about 9 feet. And for Monday, lighter winds for the Chukchi Sea, northeast at 20 knots. Otherwise, the western Arctic coast looking at northeast winds at 25 knots. Central Arctic coast, northeast at 30 knots. Swinging around to the southwest for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast Monday at 20 to 30 knots with 11 to 15-foot seas. And for tonight, again, blizzard warning out for the eastern Arctic coast. Starts at midnight tonight, continues until midnight Sunday night. And that's for east winds gusting to 60 miles an hour, creating whiteout conditions and blowing snow up that way. Otherwise, the Koyukuk Valley has a winter weather advisory until 10 p.m. tonight for gusty east winds, creating lower visibilities. Winter weather advisory out until 10 a.m. tomorrow for the Copper River Basin. Otherwise, look for periods of rain, possibly moderate to heavy for the eastern North Gulf Coast to Yakutat. Lighter amounts in over the Panhandle. And Kodiak Island stays wet. Rain and snow over southern Alaska. Areas of snow to the north, kind of drying out north of the Brooks Range. And the day Sunday looks like some snow from the Norton Sound area, northeastward to the eastern Arctic coast. Stays wet from the North Gulf Coast and mild with highs mostly in the 40s. Warmer over the Copper River Basin with rain and snow. And then for Monday, low pressure keeps it cloudy and unsettled and mild over southern Alaska. Some snow over the northern interior, dry over the upper Tanana Valley and southern Panhandle. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.